Churches are few and far between. I met a friend of mine was a missionary in India, and we had driven someplace about 5 miles and passed 7 or 8 churches or whatever. And he said to pass that many churches in India where he lived, he'd have to drive about 500 miles. And so, if someone's not going to just stumble on a church and walk in and say, what's going on here, or whatever. Let's see. So. Again, if you don't, people over here aren't going to have an understanding of Jesus. And so anyway, so we have the unreached and we have the reached. And let's take a closer look at what the world looks like and what the reached side looks like and what the unreached side looks like. So the first person way over here, is a committed Christian. She has her Bible there. She reads her Bible often, studies what it says, and lives her life as best as what God reveals to her through the Bible. And she prays regularly for her friends, for the world, and is active in her Christian community, and living out her faith the best that she knows. Now, one person represents how many? 500 million. Okay. So 500 million is a lot of people, and no one church has 500 million believers. So this is not a single church. This is any Christian living their faith. So could this be, Seventh-day-Adventist? Could it be, LDS, Baptist, Methodist, Catholics? Okay, so this is all of Christianity, who Christians living their faith out the best that to the light that they have. Okay, and let's look at our next group of people. Our next 3 people are nominal Christians. We are giving them name tags with no name.
Just a laugher.
Nominal. The word nominal means kind of in name only. So if you were to ask one of these 1.5 billion people, what are you, religiously speaking? I'm a Christian. Okay, and that is about the extent of their Christianity. Now, they may have attended church when they were young, or may go once a year at Christmas or at some time like that. If you ask them, when was the last time you went to a church? Oh, well, my brother was married 4 months ago or something, or when was the last time you prayed? Well, I was driving down the road and nearly got hit and I yelled out a profanity. Does that count as a prayer? So these people are living. Now, we have also given them light bulbs. What do you notice about the light bulbs? They're out, okay? So they have the light, but they are not connected to the source of power, okay? And so they're living their lives out just kind of, as they would see best. And but if you ask them, they would say that they're Christians. Let's go on. We'll go on and we'll talk about each one later. Okay, the next 3 people are non-Christians. Okay? And these are non-Christians in the reached part of the world. So these are people who are not Christian but are living alongside Christians. Now, we are giving them sunglasses and cell phones and they are... No, don't worry about it. No. But the non-Christians are kind of living, we call them worldly, living out, their life is, although they're also on the reached part of the world, non-Christians, who would be Muslim and Buddhist and Hindu and atheists and that sort of thing. But predominantly these are, people who, either don't profess any kind of faith at all or a faith other than Christianity, but they're living on this side of the world where they're living alongside Christians, and they have the resources that they would need in order to find out more and to learn more. Okay, so that's the reached part of the world. We'll talk about a little bit more about them in a minute. But let's look at, this is the interesting side of the world. Well, when we think of, I know, sorry, I did not mean to in any way, anyway. When it comes to missions, when we think of missions and foreign missions, this is the interesting part of the world. That was kind of what I meant. Our first two people on the unreached side of the world are Muslims, okay? And actually there's a little bit more than two people, but I didn't want to cut someone, an arm off or something. But there's about roughly 1.2, the number changes and stuff, depending on where you look for the information, about 1.2 billion Muslims in the world. Muslims are very committed. They pray 5 times a day or 3 times, depending on what sect they're a part of. They believe in the 5 pillars of faith, which say that they have to give money to the poor. They have to pray 5 times a day. They have to take a pilgrimage to Mecca. And let's see, there's 2 others. They're not coming to me. I don't want to take the time to think of them. But anyway, profession of faith. Profession of faith. That's right. Yep. And anyway, so Muslims are working their way to salvation. And at the end, if their good scale is tilted towards the good side and the bad side, then they're okay. And so they're doing all of these things in order to be saved. And they may be very committed and everything, but it is their works that is their works are what they're trying to do to save themselves. And you're going to find this to be a common theme on each of these this side of the world. Okay. Let's go on to our next person. People. Oh yes, that's right, there are 2. And those are Hindus. And Hindus live primarily
Which one?
The one I can't see.
Hey,
very attractive. Hindus live primarily in India. Now, when you have a country that's over 1 billion people on its own, and it's primarily, predominantly Hindu, you're going to have, a lot of Hindus. Now, Hindus believe in many, many gods. I was told at one point the actual technical number is like 330 million and 3 gods, something like that. And so each little village, everyone has their own little god. They have the main kind of the Hindu trinity of Shiva and Vishnu and Brahman or something like that. Anyway, but Hindus, for them, if you come and say tell them about Jesus, oh, okay, not a problem. We already have 330 million gods. What's another one? We'll just make Jesus the head of all of our other gods. And so, very challenging tasks to reach Hindus. 2 Hindus, so a billion Hindus in the world. Okay. Our next person is an atheist. We're giving him a red scarf because red is the color of communism, and communism is atheism is predominantly communist. People in China, they go to school, they're taught that there is no God, and people who believe in God are ignorant or stupid, and so there's about a half billion atheists in the world. And so these are people living in the former Soviet Union, communist bloc, China, and that sort of thing. Okay, let's see. Anything else about atheists? No? Okay. All right. Our next person, and our next 2 are close to Kelly and I's heart because these are the people who we're going to be working with when we go to Thailand. Our next person is A Buddhist. That is correct. Buddhist monks wear orange.
Mummy.
Very good, yeah. My wife was a student missionary in Thailand for 2 years. She's seen this many times. Buddhist, let's see, there's about roughly 500 million Buddhists in the world. And Buddhist monks wear the orange robe. And they shave their head, and unfortunately we forgot the clippers at home, didn't we?
It's almost.
that would have been yeah, but then we wouldn't have had the fun of clipping the hair if we Buddhists are another religion who are working their way to reach what they call nirvana, and they basically life is suffering. Buddha came to understand that life is suffering, and to live is to suffer, and to suffer is life, and all that kind of stuff. And so what a Buddhist intention is to live a good enough life so that when they come back again for another life, after they're reincarnated, that they're a little bit better. And then when they die, that they've been good enough to be a little bit better, and they work their way through life. Our friends who are going to be our partners when we're in Thailand, the missionaries Chris and Shannon Sorensen. Chris was talking to a Buddhist older gentleman, and Chris asked him, how many lives do we have to live in order to, is one life, 2 lives, 3 lives? No. He said, well, how many lives? He said, well, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 lives. Okay? How hopeless is that scenario right there? And the sad part with that story is Chris asked him, well, what if there was a way to after this life, attain nirvana, or, their idea of heaven, or, kind of, anyway. And he said, knowing that he was a Christian, I've lived a long time, and, I'm kind of set in my ways, and, maybe if you were here 20 or 30 years ago, I would have considered this, but I'm just too old. So there are people around the world who are interested, but there's, for many of them, a window of opportunity that when it closes, in their mind at least, it's not closed ultimately, but in their mind, if it's closed, it's closed. And so, yeah, Buddhists. We're going to be working with Buddhists, but they're also, our next person here, they're kind of